Today we're looking at Genesis chapters 34 to 36, which is kind of the last bit of Jacob, although actually mostly it's concerning his sons. And then that will take us up to the story of Joseph, the same Joseph being of Jason Donovan / Andrew Lloyd Webber fame. And his story is quite a big one, so that will be what finishes out the story of Genesis. The story starts with Jacob's son Dinah. I'm going to go with Dinah because Dinah sounds like somewhere to go and get burger and chips. So Dinah, it says, has herself forced upon by the son of the ruler of the land in which they're living. There's an incongruity here because it's very much a forced upon, but it also says that this chap speaks tenderly to her, loves her and wants to marry her. So I'm not sure if there's some sort of cultural fact there. If someone's not your wife or your concubine or your servant, then it's not okay to go to bed with them, and therefore it's deemed forced, or something else. But certainly the son wants to marry Dinah, so goes to his dad, who's the ruler of the city, and says, "Dad, can you get me this lady? I want her. Give it me now." Seems like a bit of a punk. Another one. So Daddy goes to Jacob and says, "Can I have your daughter so she can marry my son? I'll give you anything you want. Come and your family mix with my family, and all my people all become one society, as it were." So it's clearly the idea of some sort of integration. And to be fair, it seems pretty genuine. There's no mention of whether he's remorseful for the actions of his son, but he certainly seems otherwise, like he's reasonable motives and very open and all the rest of it. Jacob seems maybe not relaxed, but doesn't really say anything at all about it. But his sons find out and then are absolutely furious. And it's said that there's then some deceit in the mix, with the sons turning around and saying, "No, you can't marry her, not unless you get everyone in your society is circumcised." Apparently this son of the ruler is so keen on Dinah that says, "Yep, fine, no problem, but everyone gets circumcised, and then gimme." 3 days later, when the Bible notes that everybody's still in pain and doesn't note that presumably everybody's pretty miffed at the boss and his son for putting them all through that just so he can have a new lady friend, Levi and Simeon, two of Jacob's sons, go into the city and massacre all the men in the entire city. There's no statement about how many people that is or anything, and how it's possible that two people can kill all those people. So it's been pretty tough. But yes, just wander into the city and massacre all the blokes. Then, for good measure, whilst they're there, they loot the place as well. So, charming. When Jacob finds this out, oddly, all it says is that he's concerned that they've brought trouble upon him. There's no maybe that wasn't a good idea to go and kill all those people, and then God just tells Jacob, "Up sticks and get out of there." That's interesting. The story notes that the terror of God falls on all the surrounding cities, so that Jacob and his family are not pursued. So apparently it's a sort of a righteous fleeing after massacring a city. God says again at this point that Jacob needs to change his name to Israel, as he said during the wrestling in the previous story. This time it does stick though, so actually from here on Jacob is almost entirely referred to as Israel. Otherwise though, it's the same old story, so go off to this other place, be fruitful, and I will make a great nation of your descendants, etc., etc. After that there's a brief note that Jacob gets Rachel pregnant, and then she has a son, but she dies during childbirth, so being fruitful with his wife didn't go so well after God's decree there. And that's about it for that story. Chapter 36 is two lists. One list being Esau's descendants. Esau, the cool dude, we kind of got on with, and it's kind of a shame that he's disappeared. And then another list of the Edomite rulers, the Edomites being those descended from Esau. A list of those taking up until the first Israelite king is appointed, who we don't know yet, and seems to be some way off yet, given the list of Edomite rulers is not massively long, but there's a few of them. In terms of literal versus metaphorical, there's nothing at all supernatural in this other than God telling Israel, Jacob, go interchangeably, to move areas after his sons massacre everybody. So there's no difficulty really in generally accepting that as being potentially just more narration. The moral of the story is much harder though, because there doesn't seem to be any retribution at all for Simeon and Levi massacring half a city. What message that sends is very odd, but I mean, clearly it's in there for a reason. There's a risk, I suppose, that it implies that God has his people and everyone else doesn't really matter. But I realise it's not Christianity at this point, but even so, I mean, that's the same God of the Christians who seems to be cool with Simeon and Levi massacring a city. I suppose potentially the answer to that is that's suitable punishment for what the ruler's son did to Dinah. But that's certainly a very extreme response, and it's applied to an awful lot of people who had nothing to do with it, as far as it seems. It also appeared that Jacob didn't really seem that bothered about it. I mean, to be fair, in all of these stories, there's very little is actually said. It's a lot of ground is covered in very short sentences. So, I mean, maybe he did, but even so. It's a little bit disappointing, if I'm honest. The idea that God has his people and no one else matters is not, I don't know, it doesn't sit well. It doesn't feel like that could be the moral of the story. Perhaps it's just narration. Again, people who do bad things, but God has an agenda who needs to get people moving and breeding and being fruitful and building up society, and perhaps that sort of thing is not so unusual there, and it seems odd looking at it from our modern perspective that it's not okay to go and take things into your own hands, certainly not on that scale anyway. But yeah, another fairly odd story full of terrible people doing terrible things. But then we're into the Joseph story, which I think is a lot more positive. Or certainly if they're doing a musical about it, surely it's a bit positive. That's perhaps a bit of wishful thinking. But yeah, on we go and on to the next one.